to tell when they're on. That is on, believe it or not.
It is?
Yeah, and there's no, it's like very clean, no action in the button. So I can just, once I turn it around, I will just enter the button and make sure I'll keep that. There's no harm in just leaving it on. And it has to be a little bit closer. So I think these are all okay.
That's on.
The committee will come to order. Today we're considering the nominations of Kira Ahuja to be Director of the Office of Personnel Management, Anton Hajar, Amber Reynolds, and Ron Stroman to be members of the U.S. Postal Service Board of Governors. So welcome to all of you. Thank you for joining us here today, and certainly congratulations on your nominations. Thank you for your willingness to serve in these roles to help ensure that our government is working efficiently as well as effectively for the American people. Ms. Ahuja is, if confirmed, as Director of the Office of Personnel Management, or OPM. You will not only lead an agency of several thousand employees, but also serve as the Chief Human Resource Officer to millions of hardworking and dedicated public servants all across our government. Over the last few years, OPM and our federal workforce have faced many challenges. This is an incredibly important position, and I believe your extensive public service experience, including as Chief of Staff at OPM, have prepared you well to lead this agency at what is undoubtedly a pivotal time for employees at OPM and throughout the federal government. You and I have discussed, as we've discussed in the past, our nation's civil service requires an experienced, independent leader who can rebuild confidence in OPM and provide a hopeful, innovative vision for the future of the federal workforce. Our dedicated public servants are on the front line, responding to an ongoing pandemic, protecting our national security, and delivering vital services to the American people each and every day. I look forward to hearing more about how you plan to lead this critical agency. Mr. Hajar, Mr. Stroman, and Ms. McReynolds, if confirmed, you will lead the U.S. Postal Service, an essential public service for nearly 250 years that countless Americans rely on for affordable and for reliable delivery of medications, financial documents, for running their small businesses, and so much more. As you all know, the Postal Service and its dedicated workers continue facing unique challenges that have been compounded by the ongoing pandemic. And last year, we saw service standards fall dramatically due to changes that were made without consulting Congress or even studying their possible effects. Although the current situation has improved, the Postal Service continues to face enormous challenges in providing timely delivery and planning for its future. Given these challenges, it is essential that nominees to the Board of Governors are qualified leaders who will focus on service and work with the Congress to ensure that our postal workforce has the right support to deliver for the American people each and every day. Mr. Hajar, as a legal expert who has worked extensively on labor management relations, you have strong knowledge of how to forge compromises and understand the unique challenges faced by the Postal Service's large and diverse workforce. Ms. McReynolds, as a chief executive of a nonprofit and former senior local government official, you are a proven leader who has experience working with a variety of stakeholder groups. From our conversations, it's clear to me that you are knowledgeable on how the Postal Service works with states, clients, and constituents to deliver mail all across our country. Mr. Stroman, you are a lifelong public servant, and as a former Deputy Postmaster General, you have deep operational knowledge of the Postal Service. You also have an extensive record of working across the aisle as the former head of government relations. All of you have diverse and extensive leadership, public service, and legal experience that have prepared you to take on this new and challenging role. Bring fresh perspectives and address the challenges that the Postal Service faces. I look forward to hearing from each of you about your vision for improving the Postal Service, increasing accountability, and working to ensure that every American, including veterans, small business owners, rural residents, underserved communities, and seniors, can count on the Postal Service. With that, I'm going to move to swearing in witnesses. Ranking Member Portman will be here shortly. He will be giving an opening statement when he arrives. But we will move forward with the hearing now. It is the practice of this committee to swear in witnesses. So if each of you will stand and raise your right hand, please. Do you swear that the testimony that you will give before this committee will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? All of you have answered affirmatively. Thank you. You may be seated. Our first nominee is Ms. Kiran Ahuja, who is nominated to be Director of the Office of Personnel Management. Ms. Ahuja currently serves as the CEO of Philanthropy Northwest, a regional network of philanthropic institutions. After starting her career as a civil rights lawyer through the U.S. Department of Justice Honors Program, Ms. Ahuja went on to hold several leadership roles in government and in the nonprofit sector. Her public service includes serving as the founding executive director of the National Asian Pacific Americans Women Forum, executive director of the White House Initiative on Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders, and as chief of staff at OPM. Welcome to the committee. You may proceed with your opening remarks.
Thank you, Chairman Peters, Ranking Member Portman, and members of this committee for your gracious welcome. It is an honor to be considered by this committee as President Biden's nominee for Director of the Office of Personnel Management. I want to take a moment to recognize my husband, Javier Guzman, who I'm pleased to have here with me today, and to whom I owe a great deal of gratitude for his ongoing support and encouragement. Finally, I want to thank the members of the committee and their staff for taking the time to meet with me. If I am fortunate enough to be confirmed, I look forward to continuing our conversations and strengthening the relationship between OPM and this committee. It is with a degree of humility that I appear before you today. I am the daughter of Indian immigrants and very much a product of the American dream. My family came to this country in the early 1970s when I was 2 years old. My father was a trained psychiatrist who accepted an opportunity to serve in rural hospitals across the South at a time when there was great need and demand. My childhood was spent in small towns and cities across Georgia, Louisiana, and Florida, where I learned how to build bridges with people from all walks of life. Those formative years were challenging at times, but thankfully, they also taught me adaptability, perseverance, resilience, and a sense of purpose that has informed and guided me every day since. After graduating from Spelman College, a historically black college in Atlanta, Georgia, and the University of Georgia School of Law, I answered an early call to public service, beginning my career as a trial attorney at the U.S. Department of Justice through the department's honors program. I went on to lead mission-oriented organizations of all sizes in the nonprofit and public sectors. This included a return to public service, first as the executive director of the White House Initiative on Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders, responsible for increasing access to and participation in federal programs, and later as chief of staff at the Office of Personnel Management. During my time at OPM, I had the opportunity to witness firsthand the commitment, hard work, and dedication of the OPM staff and the federal workforce. I worked alongside individuals who take very seriously their oath of public office and work every day to successfully fulfill their agency's mission. I believe people are and should be at the center of all policy decisions. And if I were fortunate enough to be confirmed, I would carry forward this guiding principle while working in service to the American public. If confirmed, I pledge to protect our merit system principles, a bedrock of our civil service. It would be my mission to serve and support federal employees and to restore, rebuild, and retool the federal workforce. OPM will need to innovate to meet the modern needs of agencies with respect to recruitment, hiring, retention, engagement, and performance management. And of course, OPM also needs to honor federal retirees by providing them the high level of service they deserve. OPM cannot do this alone, and if confirmed, I'm committed to working with government partners, including Congress, to ensure OPM has the support and resources necessary to fulfill its mission, and the agency is held accountable to its obligations. As I reflect upon the examples my parents set, I think about their extraordinary journey, work ethic, and commitment to underserved communities in Savannah, Georgia. My parents began their lives as refugees following the partition of India, and despite all odds, my father obtained his medical degree. My father worked well into his later years, including starting a medical clinic for underserved Georgians in the inner city of Savannah. My mother also worked at the clinic, though not a doctor. She was the heart and soul of the operation and fully embraced her role as a servant for public good. They also embraced the culture and diversity of America, that even during my mother's retirement, she taught country line dancing at the senior center. My dad and the other husbands sat in chairs along the side of the room while the women had a blast on the dance floor. I still get text messages from some of her students. And though they have both passed away, I hope their examples live on through my own commitment to public service and community engagement. If confirmed, it would be an honor and privilege of my professional career to return again to public service as OPM's director. I thank the committee for considering my nomination, and I look forward to working with you all. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Houja. Thank you so much for the opening comments. Prior to moving to our other nominees and their opening statements, Ranking Member Portman, if you'd wish to make an opening statement.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I really appreciate it. I apologize for being late. We have two hearings going on at the same time right now, and three or four other things. And so I will keep my opening statement short, except to say I enjoyed talking with all of you, all four of you, and I appreciate your willingness to serve. As I told you in our conversations, I think you're coming forward at a very consequential time. We talked to Ms. Houja about the issues that affect the Office of Personnel Management right now, and we talked a little about some of your work there previously and the cyber attacks and information privacy issues, as well as just the need for us to deal with what GO has identified every year consistently as one of our huge challenges as a country, how to get our federal workforce motivated and improve morale. The OPM role in everything to do with human resources is important, but you're also providing technical guidance and support to agencies on a number of issues, including performance evaluation, development of workers, and overseeing the benefits program, of course, for millions of federal employees. So incredibly important time, and I look forward to your opportunity to answer some more questions today, in addition to what we talked about in person. The Board of Governors for the Postal Service is, as we talked about, kind of the Board of Directors for a private company. That's maybe the closest comparison. And I know it's part-time, but I know it's also a huge time commitment, and all of you have had experience in one way or another touching on this issue. Ms. McReynolds, with regard to mail-in ballots, and I appreciate our conversation and your nonpartisan way in which you've approached that issue. All of you, in terms of your experience, Mr. Stroman, probably the most experience of any board member in recent history, having worked at the Postal Service in various ways, including as deputy. And of course, Mr. Hajar, your work on the legal front, including working with the Postal Service union. So we've got a lot of challenges, $87 billion in losses over the past 14 years, now more than $150 billion in unfunded liabilities. At the same time, providing high-quality mail and package services to all Americans remains absolutely vital, and I know you understand that. So if confirmed, you're going to have a challenging road ahead and a lot of tough issues. We'll try to help you with some of those should you be confirmed. I know that the chairman and I want to work on some of these issues as they relate to legislative changes, but you're going to have a lot to do, including rate issues on the board. And we thank you again for your willingness to step up, and look forward to the continued questions here today and the opportunity to move these confirmations forward. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ranking Member Portman. Our second nominee is Anton Hajar to be Governor of the U.S. Postal Service. Mr. Hajar has dedicated his life to the law. He currently serves on the Council of the American Law Institute, where he advises as an expert on employment law, corporate governance, contracts, and property. He has practiced and held leadership roles at the firms Murphy Anderson and O'Donnell, Schwartz and Anderson, and he has a strong record of fighting for workers, including the hardworking, dedicated men and women of the Postal Service. His public service includes work on the National Labor Relations Board as a merchant seaman with the Military Sealift Command, and early in his career as a customs inspector. Welcome to the committee. You may proceed with your opening comments.
Thank you, Chairman Peters, Ranking Member Portman, and honorable members of this committee. Thank you for the privilege of appearing before you in connection with my nomination to be Governor of the U.S. Postal Service. At the outset, I want to extend my gratitude to my wife, Sandra. She has been most patient with my many distractions during the confirmation process, and while she has been recovering from knee replacement surgery, and to our children, Claire and Greg, who cared for Sandra while I was not available. I'd like to tell the committee about my background and qualifications for this important role. I am the oldest of 6 children raised in a working-class family and the only person in my family to attend college. From an early age, my parents instilled in me the value of hard work. If my parents were still alive, I know they would be proud to see me appearing here today. My interest in the Postal Service started at an early age when I was hired as a summer substitute letter carrier in high school. I was assigned to the Dyker Heights station in Brooklyn, New York, serving in the same neighborhood where Dr. Anthony Fauci was raised. I was initiated into the ranks of letter carriers when I was bitten by a dog and needed medical treatment. I don't mention this lightly. Dog bites are a serious hazard for letter carriers. After college, I worked for 3 years as a U.S. Customs inspector assigned to the Bush docks in Brooklyn. I also spent time working in factories, driving a truck and a taxi, serving as a hospital attendant and a janitor, among many other jobs. I was also a seaman in the United States Merchant Marine for a year. Each of these roles exposed me to a wide variety of backgrounds and gave me a deep respect for working people. Based on my career path, it seemed almost inevitable that I would end up as a labor lawyer. Upon graduation from Tulane Law School, I had the high honor of clerking for the eminent Judge John Minor Wisdom of the Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit, who is renowned for his groundbreaking civil rights opinions. After my clerkship, I worked for the New Orleans field office of the National Labor Relations Board. For over 3 years, my work took me throughout Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and the Florida Panhandle. In 1982, I went into private legal practice representing employees and unions. Gradually, my work focused mostly on the American Postal Workers Union. The APW was and still is one of the largest postal unions with over 200,000 members today. My decades of experience with the APW exposed me to the broad spectrum of postal regulatory and legal issues, from rate-making to operations. My career also gave me an important insight into the postal workforce, which is one of the most dedicated and skilled in the nation. The COVID pandemic has been a reminder that we are fortunate to have postal employees delivering for Americans every day. We know that the USPS provides stable middle-class jobs in every community across the country. But to me, the crowning achievement of the USPS is its diversity. For many underrepresented communities, including minorities, women, veterans, the USPS is the first rung on the ladder of economic opportunity. Investing in this workforce will ensure that a new generation of Americans finds its opportunity in the Postal Service. Certainly, the Postal Service faces huge challenges, particularly when it comes to declining mail volume and the need to be self-sustaining. One thing of which I am certain is that people care about the mail. When the residents in my apartment building learn that the mail is in, we all congregate around the mailroom. I have heard plenty of complaints and have had a few bad experiences myself. But these complaints are not bitter. Rather, they sound disappointed. There is a vast reservoir of goodwill towards the Postal Service, and I think we can all agree that the Postal Service must make it a priority to keep the trust of the American people before all else. Despite the challenges facing the USPS, there are also incredible opportunities to grow the business and service to the American people. I am pleased that the Postmaster General recently released a 10-year plan that protects six-day delivery and seeks to find new ways to utilize technology, expand services, and invest in the courier workforce. I am concerned about other parts of the plan, such as reducing delivery standards and raising prices that could adversely affect small business and rural communities. Working closely with management and postal stakeholders, and of course Congress, I am confident that the board can position the USPS to deliver the affordable and reliable service that all Americans deserve. I hope I will be given an opportunity to find solutions to the problems facing the USPS. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Well, thank you, Mr. Hajradzar. We appreciate your comments. Our next nominee for the Postal Service Board of Governors is Amber McReynolds. She is the CEO of National Vote at Home Institute, which is a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization dedicated to making sure that every American can vote in a secure, safe, accessible, and equitable election. She previously served as Director of Elections for the City and County of Denver, Colorado, a nonpartisan appointed position where she shared her expertise and provided important technical assistance. Her career has also included service for the Illinois state court system and the UK Parliament. Welcome to the committee, and you may proceed with your opening comments.
Good morning, Chairman Peters, Ranking Member Portman, and members of the Homeland Security and Government Affairs Committee. I appreciate you holding this hearing. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge my family here with me today and those watching from home. I'm thankful that my brother, Michael, could fly to DC and be here today. In normal times, I would have brought my son, Kenton, and my daughter, Clara, with me to see our government up close, just as they did 2 years ago when they visited the Capitol and the monuments, and they really, truly love it. I'm also grateful to my parents, Dana and Carol. Many people know my mom as Pixie, for ensuring that my children are at school on time and don't miss baseball and soccer while I'm away. The United States Postal Service is one of our most admired institutions, responsible for binding our nation together by connecting citizens to commerce, communities, and each other. It is an essential service that our citizens expect and trust. Given the importance of the Postal Service in our lives, I'm deeply humbled and honored to be nominated to serve on the Board of Governors. All Americans deserve a thriving and sustainable Postal Service, and if I'm confirmed, I look forward to working to improve postal operations, service, and citizen connectivity. My entire professional career has been focused on improving citizen experiences with government, specifically within the voting process. I served as a local election official in Denver, Colorado for 13 years and experienced firsthand the importance of building processes that deliver our essential services to the public in a fair, accessible, and secure way. During my time in local government, I designed systems that put the needs of customers, the voters, first. I am proud that the Colorado voting model has been a blueprint that many other states have used to increase citizen participation and improve systems. Our experience in Colorado proved that it is possible to improve service while also conserving costs and saving taxpayer dollars. We have demonstrated that we can increase transparency while also enhancing security and while also serving the public in a more accessible and equitable manner. And finally, I am incredibly grateful to the local and state election officials across the United States for their spectacular commitment to serving voters during the 2020 election cycle. We all owe them our gratitude. In the midst of a global pandemic, millions of Americans across the country relied on the Postal Service to cast their ballots, get their prescriptions, and ensure that their bills were paid on time. Despite great challenges, the Postal Service helped deliver democracy during the 2020 election cycle. The parallels between election administration and the Postal Service are clear in that they both have a mission to deliver an essential, nonpartisan service for all, regardless of personal circumstances, politics, or geography. Vote by mail and election mail is an essential role for the Postal Service, and if I am fortunate to serve as a governor, I will bring a perspective to the board that prioritizes the needs of Americans, just like I have done my entire career for both voters in government and also in the nonprofit sector. While Denver has been my home for the past 16 years, I grew up in a small town in Illinois where my parents still live today. The universal service obligation is essential to the daily lives of rural citizens across our nation. Whether it is prescription drugs, election ballots and information, business-related mailings, rural communities rely heavily on the Postal Service for vital connectivity and commerce. Regardless of where Americans live, we must ensure that every single community across the country has prompt, reliable, and equitable service. We know that the success of this great institution depends on the ability to adapt to change. Many of the problems facing the Postal Service are clear. Chronic underinvestment in technology, facilities, infrastructure, and the workforce have exacerbated this crisis. It is not a question of whether change is necessary, but rather whether we can collectively work together to effectuate change with solutions that focus on the future. I look forward to focusing on a better future for the Postal Service that continues to deliver reliable and affordable mail service to every community in the country. Working collaboratively with postal stakeholders and the board, I am confident that we can find creative solutions and process improvements that deliver cost savings as well as service improvements. By investing in the business and the workforce, we will be able to grow the Postal Service and bring new revenue into the system. If I am fortunate enough to be confirmed, I am committed to working on behalf of the American people to deliver the service that they expect and deserve. And I look forward to your questions today. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McReynolds. And finally, we have Ron Stroman, who is also nominated to be a governor of the U.S. Postal Service. Mr. Stroman has dedicated his career to public service, especially the Postal Service. He previously served as Deputy Postmaster General of the Postal Service from 2011 to June of 2020. As a top executive at the Postal Service, he helped manage an organization of over 640,000 employees, led customer initiatives, and also served as Chief Government Relations Officer. Prior to that, he served at the Government Accountability Office and the Department of Transportation, in the House of Representatives on the Oversight and Government Reform Committee and the Judiciary Committee, and as an attorney at the Department of Housing and Urban Development. Welcome to the committee. You may now proceed with your opening comments.
Thank you, Chairman Peters, Ranking Member Portman, members of the committee. I am honored to appear before you today as a nominee for the United States Postal Service Board of Governors. The President nominates Postal Service governors to represent the public generally, not any special interest. This nationwide mandate drives the Postal Service's unrivaled delivery network, binding our country together and linking our economy to rural, inner city, and small business communities who depend so heavily on the Postal Service. In times of crisis, the Postal Service's role as an essential part of America's critical infrastructure serves as a lifeline for all Americans. As our nation has experienced during the current global pandemic, the Postal Service is especially critical for our seniors and veterans and people with disabilities, delivering life-saving medicine, financial payments, and household necessities. In fulfilling this responsibility, America's postal workers have risked their lives every day of the pandemic. Their commitment is a testament to the resilient spirit of the American people. The country owes them a debt of gratitude, and, if confirmed, I will make their safety and well-being one of my highest priorities. I have dedicated my 41-year professional career to public service. My commitment to public service is the reason I attended Rutgers University Law Center in Newark, New Jersey, a law school with a proud tradition of diversifying the legal profession with a focus on public service. It is the reason I chose to work in the executive and legislative branches of the federal government. And it is the reason I accepted the position as the 20th Deputy Postmaster General of the United States. Serving on the Board of Governors would be the capstone of a career I have devoted to improving the lives of the American people. I am also committed to the Postal Service for personal and historic reasons. My dad, a World War II veteran, ran the shipping department of a small manufacturing company in New Rochelle, New York, where I grew up. He was responsible for shipping the metal clamps made by the factory. As a high school student, I had the opportunity to work with him after school and on the weekends. The company relied on the Postal Service to ship many of those clamps. My dad taught me how to weigh and put the right amount of postage on each shipment. Without the Postal Service, this small family-owned business might not have existed. In the case of my family and the other families working at that small business, the Postal Service indirectly created jobs and a middle-class life. For African Americans, the Postal Service helped to build the country's black middle class. It provided jobs when the doors of opportunity were too often slammed shut. During my time as the Deputy Postmaster General, I saw firsthand how the nation relies on the Postal Service. I remember traveling to North Dakota to meet with small business owners. We spent hours listening as these entrepreneurs explained their dependence on prompt and reliable delivery. I have seen individual business owners in small towns carrying packages into local post offices. If confirmed, I would bring these insights and other experiences to the board. As Deputy Postmaster General, I worked in concert with management and our governors on some of the most complex issues facing the Postal Service. I participated in organizational change initiatives, including improvements to the customer experience. I have led our teams in key votes at the Universal Postal Union. I have significant background working on postal reform legislation. If confirmed, my goal is to work in a bipartisan manner to return the Postal Service to operational excellence, future growth, and long-term financial stability. In closing, let me quote from the 1968 report of the President's Commission on Postal Organization, better known as the Capel Commission, which laid the foundation for today's Postal Service. Quote, "Full management responsibility and authority would be vested in a board of directors charged with providing the nation with a superb mail system, offering universal service at reasonable rates, paying fair wages to postal employees, and giving full consideration to the public welfare. If confirmed, I promise to do my best to live up to that ideal as a governor of the United States Postal Service. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today, and I look forward to your questions."
Thank you, Mr. Stroman, for your opening comments. Well, there are three questions that the committee asks of every nominee, and I'm going to ask the question, and then I think we'll go down. I just need to go down the list here. You can answer yes or no. After I ask the question, Mr. Stroman will have you start, and then we'll go down the table here. First, is there anything you are aware of in your background that might present a conflict of interest with the duties of the office for which you have been nominated?
No, Mr. Chairman.
No.
No, Mr. Chairman.
Second, do you know of anything, personal or otherwise, that would in any way prevent you from fully and honorably discharging the responsibilities of the office for which you have been nominated?
No, Mr. Chairman.
No.
No, Mr. Chairman.
And lastly, do you agree without reservation to comply with any request or summons to appear and testify before any duly constituted committee of Congress if you are confirmed?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Great, thank you. Ms. Haruja, my first question is for you. As you're well aware, federal cybersecurity is a significant challenge to agencies as we continue to face breaches and we struggle to have a specialized workforce to help protect those networks. This is something that this committee is focused on. We're going to continue to be focused on in the months and years ahead. And are looking at a variety of ways to make sure that we continue to retain and attract a quality workforce. Earlier this month, I reintroduced legislation, for example, entitled the Federal Rotational Cyber Workforce Program, which allows folks to have experience in different agencies, hopefully break down some of the silos that we currently have within our agencies. It does require looking at personnel management in a different way than we've looked at it in the past here at the federal government. It's an attempt to address some of those problems, but you will have many other ideas that will come forward from this committee as well. So my question to you is, if confirmed, will you commit to working with me on these and other legislative proposals, and will you make this a priority?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for that question. I very much appreciate the work that you've been doing around cyber talent. I think it's an important issue, and I definitely commit to working with you in this committee on those issues. Great.
Well, thank you. This next question will go to our three nominees for the Postal Board of Governors. You know, in my state, and as well as folks all across the country, as you've all mentioned in your opening comments, they rely on Postal Service for timely delivery. Millions count on the Postal Service every day to deliver medications, to deliver their paychecks, to run their small businesses. And as a public service, the Postal Service must balance a lot of different requirements every day. But bottom line, it's about service to the American people. So my question to each of you, if you take a moment to answer, is, if confirmed, will you focus on improving the quality and the reliability of mail delivery? And please briefly discuss how you approach the challenge of improving service. Mr. Ajjar, we'll start with you and then work down the table.
Thank you for that question, Mr. Chairman. The Postal Service, as you point out, is a service. And it is a fundamental, it's in the law, a fundamental service to the American people. And it's also in the law that the Postal Service must provide prompt, reliable, and efficient service to all communities, including rural communities. So the way I see it is not a discretionary thing. It's a mandatory thing. It's an obligation of the Postal Service. It's something that the Postal Service should pay attention to every day. And that the governors, as the overseers, if you will, of the Postmaster General and management, have to be sure that that they are held accountable for fulfilling the obligations that the Congress of the United States has made a priority for the Postal Service.
Thank you. Ms. McReynolds?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And as I did state in my opening statement, service is absolutely essential, and we have to restore the service levels that have been declining over the last few years. And we have to do so in a comprehensive way that addresses not only the financial stability of the Postal Service long-term, but more importantly, ground process improvements and innovations in technology with a focus on customers and creating customer-centric and pro-customer processes. And I also think we have to fully assess where stakeholders are, engage with stakeholders on their feedback. We have to balance the needs of rural communities with urban communities and consider the variances that might exist across the country in terms of enhancing service for the American people and building trust with the public on the Postal Service and the service that they are offering.
Well, thank you. Mr. Stroman?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The universal service obligation of the Postal Service requires delivering prompt, reliable, and efficient service to all Americans all over the country. And it starts, it seems to me, with having a plan to ensure that you have great service. That starts from the top of the organization and filters down throughout the organization. You have to have an organizational structure that allows you to work through issues on a cross-functional basis. It has to have an organizational structure that allows you to quickly respond to issues. One of the things that the Postal Service did over the last several years is to disaggregate data as it relates to service. So now we can look at rural versus urban service and quickly compare that. But essentially, it's a cultural issue. It's a plan issue. You have to be an agile organization that allows you to quickly respond to concerns, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. As the three of you know, the board is currently considering changes to service standards that would increase some target delivery times, as well as a variety of other changes to the Postal Service network. So I'd like to have each of you respond yes or no, and perhaps briefly after that, but yes or no would be good. If confirmed, will you commit to collecting additional feedback from customers about these proposed changes and carefully evaluating any changes to Postal Service operations to ensure that they do not harm customers? Ms. McReynolds, I'll start with you. So equal opportunity here to start the first question. We'll start with you and then go to Mr. Stroman and then Mr. Hazar.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And yes, I absolutely do. And I think that stakeholder engagement is particularly important in improving service and improving operational functions within the Postal Service. And I also think stakeholder engagement is critical to creating a more adaptable organization long-term and creating better technologies and innovations that can better support customers through the process. So I think it's absolutely critical, and I will absolutely commit to engaging with stakeholders.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I also agree to that. The governor's responsibility is to represent the public generally. In order to represent the public, I think it's crucial that that the board get input from stakeholders all across the country and from its business customers, and that you take that input and you consider it in formulating your plans, and then you communicate broadly to the American public what the basis of your decisions have been. So I think it's, you certainly have my commitment.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I agree completely. The service, the deterioration of service in recent times is simply unacceptable. It can't be the hallmark of the Postal Service that it's declining in delivering service to the American people. I believe, as I said in my opening statement, there is an enormous reservoir of goodwill among the people for the Postal Service. That has to be preserved. It cannot be squandered. It's the strength of the Postal Service. So service has to be job one.
Right, well, thank you to each of you for that commitment. I now recognize Ranking Member Portman for his questions.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Ahuja, as I said, big job at OPM. Here's a recent survey that was done, Federal Employee Viewpoint Survey. 39% of federal employees believe their promotions are based on merit, meaning the rest do not, which would be very concerning. Only 34% believe poor performance is addressed by management. How will you improve the hiring process at the federal level so that it maximizes merit and addresses poor performance?
Thank you, Ranking Member Portman, for that question, and I very much appreciate those concerns. I understand that it can be challenging at times to manage poor performance. I will say that what I have seen in most cases in executive roles is that oftentimes poor performance shows up because of lack of employee engagement or a mismatch of skills and talents for that position, or there just isn't really clear metrics around the performance evaluation. So related to focusing on poor performers, I think it's key to think about and to focus on what OPM can do, if I was confirmed, around supporting agencies around performance management guidance, supporting managers and understanding those processes, because those processes are important, and it's important to carry those out. You know, oftentimes managers, you know, they're focused on their work, not as much around the day-to-day of supervision, and that's equally important.
Well, we'd like to, should you be confirmed, we'd like to work with you on this issue, because I do think
Definitely.
it's one of the reasons you have some of the turnover and the poor morale that we've been talking about in other contexts, including our conversation. Let me ask you something specific. I'm concerned about some aspects of the administration's new detailee program, sending federal workers to assist with the border surge. In particularly, these individuals apparently are allowed to begin working with kids prior to completing a child care investigation background check under OPM's program. They really aren't qualified, many of them, to do this. With the reports of abuse in border shelters in particular, how will you ensure children's safeties in these facilities as you continue with this detailee program, should you be confirmed?
Thank you, Ranking Member Portman, for that question. I am aware of the volunteer detail program that is being provided. Oftentimes, OPM does provide these type of support services for agencies, especially when they need to surge capacity, oftentimes related to disasters. In particular, to your question regarding the safety of those children, you know, there are also suitability standards. My understanding is that would be incorporated in the review of those individuals as they go down to the border to ensure that they have the appropriate...
If confirmed, would you agree to work with us on that to make sure that people have the qualifications they need at a time when the surge is just overwhelming everybody? I understand that the federal government's paying sponsors now, as an example, which we've never done before, and we want to be sure these kids aren't suffering any more than they already have been because of personnel that aren't qualified.
Yes, Ranking Member Portman, I do would look forward to working with you.
Okay. You were Chief of Staff at OPM during the fallout from the 2015 data breach that affected over 21 million federal workers. We talked about that already in our private conversation, but what would you do to improve OPM's cybersecurity efforts specifically? I know you've talked generally about that, but how do we avoid these kinds of breaches in the future?
Thank you, Ranking Member Portman, for that question. Spending my time at OPM short after the data breaches, I definitely understand how incredibly important this issue is. I think one thing that we incorporated that I would continue to do, if confirmed, is to be hypervigilant around cyber attacks. They are ever evolving, as we see. So at the time, we set up a fairly responsive cyber incident response system. My understanding is that still rates as the best in government. I also think it's focused on IT leadership, having the skills within that office. And I also think a pathway to IT modernization is going to help us really manage some of the challenges with keeping the system.
Well, would you commit today to working with us? We talked earlier, Chairman talked about workforce. We have passed legislation on trying to advance cyber workforce, which is one of the answers here, to have the smartest, the best people on the inside pushing back. Would you commit to working with us on that and focusing on that, should you be confirmed?
Yes, I would, Senator.
A lot of the federal workforce has been working remotely, and the American people, I think, need access to some of these services in person, and we certainly find this back home in Ohio. As we're trying to help our veterans, we're trying to help the folks with Social Security issues and other things. Telework works in some cases and doesn't in others. We need to get people back to work, in my view, to help serve those constituents as the COVID-19 crisis continues to improve. If confirmed, would you commit to getting the federal workforce back to the office safely, efficiently, and as soon as possible?
Thank you, Ranking Member Portman, for that question. I very much commit to doing such efforts and definitely balancing the safety of the federal workforce. That's going to be incredibly important, as well as the obligations that agencies have to the American public.
In a panel discussion in 2016, you made a number of comments about abortion, including your support for repealing the Hyde Amendment. We discussed this on our call earlier this week, but would you commit now to administering the Federal Health Employee Benefits Program in accordance with existing law?
Ranking Member Portman, I understand the role of Director of OPM and that the Hyde Amendment is the law of the land, and I will follow the law, yes.
Our postal governor nominees, again, thank you for your willingness to step up. Mr. Stroman, one thing you did when you were there is you helped me in Ohio with regard to being sure that our Postal Service was working in connection with the election, but also implementation of the STOP Act. I'm still frustrated, as you know, that we haven't fully implemented it, although we've made good progress. And unfortunately, the fentanyl is now moving more through Mexico as a result. But it has been very helpful, but it has not been fully implemented. Would you commit to personally being involved in this issue and ensuring we can get this full implementation, including 100% advanced electronic data from China?
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman. I think it's getting that data is not only, it's the law of the land, and it is key to helping to prevent fentanyl and other illicit drugs coming into the country. So I think it's a responsibility of the Postal Service to implement that, and you have my full assurance that I will be personally involved in implementing that provision.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't have time to ask another question, Mr. Chairman. I just want to put into the record that I asked all three of the witnesses whether they had received any outside pressure with regard to firing of the current Postmaster General, because there are outside groups that have been asking the administration to only put people forward who have made that commitment. They all told me they had not made any commitments and they had not been pressured. Is that accurate? Nod if yes.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ranking Member. The chair recognizes Senator Hassan for her questions.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair and Ranking Member Portman, and good morning to all the witnesses. Thank you so much for your service and your willingness to serve. I have questions for each of you, so I'm going to start with Ms. Ahuja. It was nice to talk with you via Zoom, whenever that was, a week or two ago. The use of out-of-date and commercially unsupported information technology by federal agencies is one of the main drivers of increased IT maintenance costs, because these aging systems rely on expensive expert and contract personnel instead of a more nimble and generalized IT workforce. In addition, these systems diminish effective delivery of services to the American people, including those struggling to access their retirement benefits due to the Office of Personnel Management's aging technology infrastructure, and expose agencies as well to security threats. So as Director of the Office of Personnel Management, how will you advocate for government-wide IT modernization in order to reduce costs associated with specialized contractors, increase security, and improve service delivery to the American people?
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Hassan, and it was wonderful to chat with you previously, and we talked about this issue, and I completely agree with you that we have to be able to move off of these legacy systems, focus on IT modernization, and that would be a high priority for me if I was confirmed. There's a number of areas of focus that would need to take place at OPM, the retirement services, of course, other aspects of the personnel system, moving to a digital record, those type of things. And there is a real balance, and unfortunately, because of having to maintain legacy systems, it is taken away from doing the modernization. I will be upfront with my colleagues in partnership with them, appreciate the IT Modernization Fund. I think that's a big step forward.
Thank you very much. To Mr. Hujar, at my request, the Postal Service Inspector General issued a report that found that the main cause of postal delays and poor service in New Hampshire was due to a lack of permanent staff. Since the report came out in December 2020, the Postal Service has hired more than 150 new permanent employees in New Hampshire, something that will surely help to improve service to the Granite State. Drawing on your experience as General Counsel of the American Postal Workers Union, how could the Postal Service better engage with the postal unions to promote recruitment and retention of a robust postal workforce in order to improve service nationwide?
Senator, thank you for that question. The Postal Reorganization Act focuses clearly on having a career workforce and opportunities for advancement of the career workforce. And the 10-year plan, I'm pleased to see one aspect of it is to refocus on and depend on the career workforce. There was a big turnover of the non-career workforce, which according to the 10-year plan was a large contribution to the service failures that we experienced. And and the 10-year plan also dedicates itself specifically to complying with all collective bargaining agreements with the unions. So I'm hopeful that the Postal Service will do that, and by relying on well-trained, reliable career workers, service will improve.
Thank you. Now I'm going to move on to Ms. McReynolds. Good morning. Similar to Colorado, though not nearly as large, New Hampshire has its fair share of rural, remote, mountainous areas that can be difficult to access, but nevertheless deserve reliable delivery from the Postal Service to receive essential items like prescriptions or food, or to run their small businesses. How will you draw on your experience working with rural or remote communities in Colorado and across the country to advocate for reliable service in hard-to-reach locations?
Well, thank you for the question, Senator. I did grow up in a rural community. My parents still live there, and I also, in my work in Colorado, at improving the voting systems, I worked with rural communities across Colorado, and this was actually a huge issue that when the postal network started to change back in 2012, and there was consolidation of various networks, we had a huge impact, and we had to have a lot of conversations with the Postal Service about how to respond to that, address that, and improve service in rural communities. So I absolutely think that rural communities are essential in terms of any changes that get put forward with network or even service, and we have to maintain it, and we have to maintain the universal service obligation that is outlined clearly in the law. And it's important, I also believe, to engage rural stakeholders directly on what is important to them, what they need, what they don't have access to now, and look for opportunities that are creative and innovative to better serve them.
Thank you for that answer. And now, Mr. Stroman, to stabilize the Postal Service's financial position and institute reforms, there has to be a good faith exchange of information and ideas between Postal Service leadership and Congress. Based on your own experience working on congressional oversight, what will you do as a governor to promote transparency and accountability on behalf of the Postal Service?
Thank you for that question, Senator. I think there are a couple of things that certainly I would want to do. I have, in my career, worked in a bipartisan fashion to ensure that there's a free flow of information. Congress is a key stakeholder in overseeing the Postal Service and getting input from the Postal Service. And I think it's incumbent on both the board and management to reach out and get information and get the opinions of Congress and take that into account. Ultimately, part of the financial stability of the Postal Service rests in Congress's passing postal reform. In order for that to happen, Congress needs to understand and communicate clearly with the Postal Service. And I certainly commit, as if I am fortunate enough to be confirmed as a governor, to work closely with the Congress, both in transmitting information and responding to requests for information. And we'll hopefully work together on postal reform legislation.
Well, I would look forward to that. One thing I would just add is that we often are a source of data collection for all of you, too. My office keeps track of constituent calls and complaints about the Postal Service, and it's been really important in getting some of these recent improvements in New Hampshire that we were able to present the information directly from constituents, which didn't always line up with what the Postal Service was telling us.
Absolutely, and I would say, you know, in my role as Deputy Postmaster General, I received many of those concerns, and they were enormously helpful in helping us pinpoint service issues throughout the country. I mean, it's one of the ways that I think we use that information to help improve service for the American people. So I absolutely agree with that.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Hessen. Senator Johnson, you're recognized for your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Portman asked the Postal Board of Governor nominees whether during the nomination process anybody asked for your commitment in terms of, I think, the termination of the Postmaster General. And you answered that nobody asked for that commitment. I'll expand the question a little bit further. Did anybody in the nomination process talk about Postmaster General DeJoy's performance? I'll start with you, Mr. Hajar.
No, Senator.
Ms. McReynolds.
No, Senator.
Mr. Stroman.
No, Senator.
One of the reasons I raised this question, I think the Postmaster General was very unfairly criticized during the lead up to the election. Mr. Stroman, having served in the Postal Service, let me ask you, the retirement of the blue boxes, was there anything unusual that occurred in the lead up to the election? Or was that pretty much scheduled retirements?
Thank you for the question, Senator. I had left, I think, by that time. Removal of blue mailboxes is historically done with you do a density survey. So you determine what the volume is in a blue mailbox. If it falls below a certain level, then depending upon community input, you can remove the blue mailbox, consistent with the regulations of the Postal Service.
Again, so that's an ongoing process, correct?
It is an ongoing process.
You know, I would expect you probably maintain some contacts in the Postal Service. Did you hear of anything unusual in terms of removal of the blue boxes after you left?
I will say to you, Senator, that I was statutorily prohibited from having contact with employees at the Postal Service.
Okay. One of the issues that the Postmaster General was addressing was the high cost of overtime. I don't have the exact figures, but it's somewhere in the $4 to $5 billion per year. Is that pretty accurate?
Yeah, I think that's right.
The way he addressed it, and I really want kind of your perspective on this, was the first thing he noticed, and he's a logistics expert, is the Postal Service was not adhering to their own dispatch schedules. Trucks would sit around, they'd wait to the final envelope to get everything delivered exactly on time. And so when they began adhering to those dispatch schedules, which was designed to, over time, improve efficiency and improve service levels while dramatically decreasing overtime. That was what was going on in terms of the initial dip in on-time delivery. Is that your understanding of what was happening?
My understanding, Senator, is that there was a disconnect between processing and transportation. So the transportation runs on a schedule, and that schedule should be linked up with your processing of the mail and packages, and it wasn't linked up, resulting in overtime because the mail wasn't processed in time. The problem was that in order to solve that problem, you've got to fundamentally solve the problem on processing. And so having the trucks leave on schedule means that mail was going to be left and it was going to delay the mail. I think if you looked at the IG report that the Postmaster General had identified as the basis for that movement, the IG report laid out about 10 different processing steps that needed to be taken. And I think you have to resolve that problem. Then you can link up with your transportation schedule. But identifying that as an issue was certainly, it is a legitimate issue that has to be addressed. And one of the things to solve the financial problems in the Postal Service is solving those efficiencies. And I think that's exactly the right thing to do.
Just to give you the opinion of other Board of Governors, in a September 2020 report, Governor William Zoller has told the Washington Post, quote, this is about DeJoy, he has 100% board support from a logistics and operations standpoint. Louis DeJoy is as good as it gets. He has support on both sides of the aisle. In a hearing here for a different nomination, John Barger said that, quote, when Louis DeJoy assumed the role of Postmaster General, we were thrilled to be able to attract a person of his caliber to the United States government. The man is doing a tremendous job. And then finally, in a House Oversight Committee hearing in February of this year, Democrat Chairman Ron Bloom said to DeJoy, quote, the Board of Governors believes the Postmaster General is in very difficult circumstances and doing a good job. So I guess my own viewpoint, having met with and talked to the Postmaster General, I would agree with certainly Mr. Bloom that it's a tough job, and he's doing a pretty good job, and he brings a level of expertise. So again, I'm hoping that you all maintain a very open mind and work with somebody who has that kind of logistics expertise. Let me ask, one of the reasons I actually supported Ron Bloom as a Board of Governor is when I asked him during a hearing whether he supported the previous administration's task force recommendation to reform the postal system without a taxpayer bailout. Mr. Bloom agreed with that position. Now, obviously, because of all the COVID relief, looks like the postal system will get a fair amount of taxpayer bailout. Beyond that, though, would you also agree with that assessment that the postal system has to come up with reforms and do it on their own? Mr. Hajar.
Thank you, Senator. Yes, I agree with that. The Postal Reorganization Act requires the Postal Service to be self-sufficient.
Okay, I need a quick move on. Ms. McReynolds, would you agree with that?
Yes, and I agree. Under the law, it's supposed to be self-sufficient, so that's what certainly our goal should be.
Okay, Mr. Stroman.
I agree. It's an independent entity within the executive branch.
I think the other issue really is an upgrade to their vehicle fleet, their equipment. I know there have been some contracts let out. Do you also agree, all three of you, and I'll just one at a time, then I'll be out of time, that we do have to upgrade the vehicle fleet, and that's an important priority of the postal system? I'll start with you, Mr. Stroman.
Yes, that is certainly a priority, but there are other priorities as well in terms of the infrastructure of the Postal Service. But that certainly is a major priority, given the age of the fleet.
Ms. McReynolds.
Yes, and I would add that there are other infrastructure priorities as well.
Okay, Mr. Hajar.
There's no doubt that the fleet needs to be upgraded. It's a very, very old fleet.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Johnson. Senator Langford, you are recognized for your questions.
Thank you, Chair. Suja, let's get a chance to be able to visit some more. We visited by phone recently, and so let's get the opportunity to be able to follow up on a few of these things. Senator Portman asked you earlier about remote work and about telework and how quickly can we get people in. I'm going to ask you the opposite. Are there jobs that you feel like we've discovered during the last year that could be permanently remote work. And what I'm focused on are areas of spouses that work for people in the United States military on active duty. Their spouses have a very difficult time getting jobs in different places. If they were allowed to work remotely, they could be assigned with their spouse anywhere in the world and still have the opportunity to be able to work for one of our agencies, and that would open up a lot of opportunities for them. So what I want to ask you about is what your opinion on remote work in the sense identifying jobs that could be permanently and assumed they're not going to be in Washington, D.C., but work with some of the agencies.
Thank you, Senator Langford. I enjoyed having that conversation with you a few days ago. I'm very much in support of the opportunities that telework and remote work would provide, and if confirmed as OPM director, that would be something that I would definitely be leaning into. I think we are completely rethinking work at this moment, not just the federal government, but for all across the country. I think not only does it give opportunities to individuals who are not necessarily based in an urban center, but a way to actually provide service and give our thanks, especially to military spouses in places where they are located in remote locations. I also think there are opportunities on how we think about locality pay, where there are savings in that sense, as well as really the size and expansive, expansion of a office footprint. There will be definitely some of that retraction related to some of the savings there.
Okay, well, look forward to that ongoing dialogue if you're confirmed on that, because I think this is an essential next step for us in the federal workforce. Let's flip to the other side, not just from hiring and listing new jobs, but for retirees. The most common issue I hear from federal retirees is the simple fact that if they work for multiple agencies, getting them into the retirement benefits process takes months for them. How do we make that faster? How do we get a smoother system so that there is a seamless process from application interview, all the way to onboarding, through their reviews, all the way to retirement as well?
Sure. So, Senator, just to be clear, you're talking about the full retirement process.
That's
itself.
correct.
Well, as you know, it is a paper-based process, which I think lends itself to being very extensive and very long. And I think with multiple agencies and different payroll providers, and as long as it's paper-based, I think we're going to have these challenges of length of time. If I was confirmed as OPM director, I would commit to an IT modernization plan for retirement services, certainly short-term goals around a new call center technology, piloting modern retiree experiences, fast track for applications that are easier to kind of manage, as well as more long-term. I really do think that, and this is not just for retirement services, the way to improve these times is ultimately through the IT modernization process that's going to be required.
Yeah, it will definitely be required. Unfortunately, every director of OPM has said almost exactly that for the last several years.
Right.
How do we actually move from talking about that to doing it? What do you think is going to be a key aspect?
Well, I think it helps that we have the IT Modernization Fund, to be quite honest. That hasn't existed in the past, and I think resources are needed. In the case of OPM, I think the challenges have been not having stable leadership at the top. And as I mentioned to you, Senator Langford, I commit to being there as long as I have the support of all of you and President Biden, because I do think it's going to be needed.
Great. Yeah, we have had multiple directors here for a while and a lot of change, and that's hard to be able to get things moving on it. Shifting a little bit about federal employee health benefits. OPM runs one of the largest systems for insurance in the country. So what OPM does affects not only federal workers, but affects everyone in that sense, and how actually insurance is handled, because it's such a large provider in the middle for federal employee health benefits. Senator Portman earlier asked you about some of the previous statements you've made. You've been very public on your preference on abortion. I understand that. That is your right as an American to be able to express your opinions publicly. But stepping into this role, we also have the Hyde Amendment, Smith Amendment, very clear legal boundaries that we do not use federal dollars for abortion providing, nor trying to incentivize that in any ways. Now, that wouldn't have been as much of an issue, but in the $2 trillion COVID package that Democrats passed on a straight party line just a few weeks ago, they, for the first time in 40 years, included funding for Hyde provisions and actually broke that lock-solid rule that's been there for that particular set of funds. So this has now become a much bigger issue. So my straightforward question is, regardless of your personal views on this, would you follow the law on the issue of abortion financing through using federal health dollars or federal tax dollars to provide abortion?
Thank you, Senator, for that question. I understand the role and responsibilities for this position, and I would absolutely follow the law.
Okay, thank you for that. There is some debate right now as well, and it would be another difficult issue out there just with policy. We as Americans and through the federal government are neutral to every single American. Every American is valued, every American is equal across the board. But we have some unique health challenges when we talk about transgender and sex reassignment surgeries, especially for children. And there's been a push to say for the federal employee health benefits that we should allow sex reassignment surgeries and also puberty blockers for children. There are a lot of medical professionals that are very uncomfortable with that. How will you manage a decision like that when you've got activists saying one thing and health professionals saying another and trying to be able to strike that balance?
Thank you, Senator, for that question. I do understand that there are strong views on both sides. I do think, again, as my role and responsibility as OPM director, if I was confirmed, we talked about this before. I think there are some significant issues as an employee-sponsored health program, the largest one, around ensuring the benefits are comprehensive, they're competitive, there is parity between mental health services. And, you know, right now I'm not inside OPM, but I would commit to better understanding the issue, getting a sense of what is happening inside the agency, and to have a further conversation with you to understand your concerns and take that into consideration.
This will be an area we'll definitely need to continue to talk about because there are lots of concerns that taxpayers will actually bring to me and will bring to others to say, hey, I want to respect all people, but there are a lot of medical questions here, and there's a lot of questions just about federal tax dollars and where that's going to go. And so I'd be interested to be able to maintain that ongoing dialogue. For the postal nominees, I apologize. I've not had the opportunity to be able to visit with you as we limited on time. Embarrassingly enough, I will email you some questions for the record. I guess I should put a stamp on them and mail them to you. But we'll contact you with some questions for the record and be able to follow up. Thank you. We've all had the opportunity to be able to visit one-on-one already as well, so thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Langford. Senator Padilla, you are recognized for your questions.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Have questions for, first question is for Ms. Ahuja. Appreciate the opportunity to have connected by phone previously. So just wanted to follow up on the conversation in this setting on what we both recognize as sort of two converging dynamics as it pertains to our federal workforce. Number one, the large number of our federal employees, particularly at the upper management levels and leadership levels that are eligible for retirement in the next decade. And thoughts on the state of affairs when it comes to succession planning and training and grooming the next generation of leaders. That being number one. Number two, the question about the diversity of our workforce and being intentional about recruitment and retention as we strive for a workforce that is reflective of our nation. So if you want to just spend a couple of minutes on talking about those and especially where they intersect, an opportunity to elevate leadership in various departments and agencies that again are as diverse as our beautiful country.
Thank you, Senator, for that question. And I was going to say the same, that I think they do intersect when you're talking about or thinking about the retirement wave, about succession planning, how we're thinking about recruitment. A part of that is being focused on the support of the individuals inside the government already, giving them training opportunities, being hyper-focused on professional development. That's going to be important. I think one thing that we've learned from this pandemic is that our workforce is incredibly important and that we should really be focused on the kinds of opportunities that they're being provided and the value and contributions of their service. I would say there's real opportunities with some of what I call the feeder programs, which are expanding the Presidential Management Fellows Program, where we can work out some of the kinks with the Pathways Program, focused on bringing in individuals early in their career. I've always said the federal government should be able to be quite competitive because it has an amazing mission. And that's a huge draw, I think, for people early in their careers, and we really should take advantage of that and really focus on diversity. Our workforce should reflect the diversity in this country. It is a huge asset. It gives us a competitive advantage. And I think individuals want to see not only diversity all throughout the workforce, but in the senior ranks, that they see individuals that come from their communities, that there's a breadth of experience and people bringing those experiences from all walks of life. So I do agree with you. I think it's an important priority for us to have collectively, and it's something that I will focus on if confirmed.
And I do think we're also at a unique time in our country where people with significant private sector experience or even in academia are more than able and willing to establish some sort of public service. So look forward to continuing our conversations and efforts in that regard. Next question for Mr. Hajar, Mr. Reynolds, and Mr. Stroman. As we've had a chance to discuss previously as well, you know, I had, it was a deep but very specific experience with USPS on the service delivery side in my prior capacity as California's Secretary of State, particularly as we moved the most populous state in the nation with the largest electorate of any state in the nation strongly and quickly in the direction of a lot more vote by mail that had been previously popular, but the vast majority of the Californians voting last year were by mail, and working through issues of transition, et cetera. You know, we had a chance to experience a lot of the mechanics and logistics of Postal Service delivery, not just when it came to ballots, but voter information guides and, you know, political mail, et cetera. And it had the insight of the changing dynamics in the Postal Service generally over time, particularly during COVID, letter mail versus package delivery, et cetera. And so the one question I'd direct to each of you is post that discussion and given your respective perspectives getting here, you know, what ideas you may have for further evolution, service improvements through the Postal Service. We can continue any ideas to improving further on our effectiveness and our efficiency and the equity of Postal Service delivery. We know it's important for Americans, not just because of elections, but whether it's receiving mail, commercial activity, prescriptions, and so much more. I'll turn it over to each of you for a quick response.
Well, thank you, Senator. I'll start by saying that the service deteriorations really are simply unacceptable, and we need improvement. And I think it's right there in the Postmaster General's 10-year plan that he wants to bring back the confidence of the American people in the Postal Service. I think that has to be the first priority. There are a lot of important aspects of the 10-year plan. Some of them are quite lengthy, but the number one thing, I think, is to restore service so that people do not have their confidence shaken in the ability of the Postal Service to deliver effective, timely, reliable service.
Well, thank you, Senator Padilla, for that question. And I think there's multiple ways to improve service while also creating innovations that increase the accountability and transparency for customers and for those that use the Postal Service. And one good example that I just want to highlight is something that you implemented statewide in California and that I also helped a few other states implement for the 2020 election, which was a system called ballot tracking. And that really is similar to what the Postal Service has in terms of informed delivery, but ballot tracking specifically for election mail increases accountability and security for vote by mail in particular. And California was certainly a leader, Nevada and Georgia. We actually helped both Nevada and Georgia in 2020 implement both of those systems that provided significantly improved service to those that were using the Postal Service to send their ballots back.
Thank you for the question, Senator. Several things. One thing is non-career employees. One of the provisions of the Postmaster General's plan is a reduction on reliance on non-career employees. Non-career employees save you some money, but they do hurt you on the service side because the turnover there is very high. So I think less reliance on non-career, more reliance on career employees. I think training is absolutely critical. You've got to invest in training. You have to have an organizational structure that allows, I think, all of the service issues to be resolved very quickly, very promptly. Ultimately, though, I think it's data. You have to have a system of analysis of key data points that identify where problems are and resolve them at the lowest possible level. And then you've got to have a system where you are engaging with your customers and you're engaging with the public. We talked a little bit with Senator Hassan about input from customers all throughout the nation. So ensuring that you have a structure which allows you to get input. The Postal Service meets quarterly with members of Congress out in the field, and that's an opportunity to hear from constituents across the country. So getting that input and using that input to solve problems, I think, is critical.
Well, thank you to all of you. Look forward to our ongoing conversation and work together. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Padilla. Senator Hawley, you're recognized for your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks to all of the witnesses for being here. Congratulations on your nominations. Ms. Ahuja, if I could just start with you. Last September, it was reported that employees in the executive branch were required to attend workplace diversity trainings in which they were told that, I'm quoting now, virtually all white people contribute to racism, end quote, and were required to say that they, quote, they benefit from racism, they, the employees, end quote, along with other ideas that, frankly, I think are deeply divisive, amount to left-wing indoctrination, and really are attempts to divide the American people, in this case federal employees, along the lines of race. I bring this up because you have experience at OPM from 2015 to 2017, I believe. Were you involved in any capacity or in creating or organizing these particular trainings? Do you recall?
Thank you, Senator, for that question. No, I wasn't involved in those trainings, but I'm aware, in my current organization, and we work with a lot of members in the Northwest, that a lot of companies are using diversity inclusion trainings. They find it as an important resource to create a supportive and inclusive environment and really help them have a competitive advantage of really understanding people from all walks of life. So not particular to OPM, but certainly I've seen it more broadly being used in this country more and more.
And do you support it? I mean, the last administration ceased diversity training that contained any elements of what is sometimes called critical race theory. Do you agree with that decision by the prior administration or no?
Thank you, Senator, for that question. I, don't know specifics about the trainings that you're citing. The ones that I have been exposed to and been familiar with have really encouraged understanding people from all walks of life, really creating an inclusive work environment. I especially think for the younger generation, that is what they're looking for, not only individuals who look like them, that there's a diverse workforce, but that there is an understanding and value for the experiences that people have had.
Let me ask you this: during your time as CEO at Philanthropy Northwest, you've repeatedly invoked the work of Dr. Kendi, who has become famous for his theory of anti-racism. Mm-hmm. In a blog post that you wrote, you endorsed an article by Dr. Kendi where he claimed that Donald Trump's election in 2016 was an example of racist progress. Those are his words, racist progress. Do you agree with Dr. Kendi's claim that the election of the former president was racist progress?
Thank you, Senator, for that question. I have worked with Dr. Kendi. He's come to speak at events where we have promoted greater conversation around issues of racial equity and equality. I don't know specific to that statement, but he's been within the philanthropic space, a thought leader around how to think about issues of achieving greater equity, especially in, communities of color. How can funders think about how they, how will they allocate their grant making, the type of partnerships that they pursue. So I think in that respect, he's tried to provide a perspective of how to have, a more nuanced understanding of where resources should go based on the historical experiences and history within this country of which communities have really had challenges along the way.
But do you just, let me just ask you for your own view. I mean, you've cited, and as I said in a blog post you wrote, endorsed the article in which he made this claim, but setting aside whatever his view may be, he's not here today. But your view, do you agree that the election of Donald Trump is an example of racist progress in this country?
Senator Hawley, I thank you for that question. I have not made any of those type of statements about the election. I've been in the philanthropic space for the past few years. And so, no, I can't speak to that particular position that Dr. Kendi has made.
But I'm asking you if you agree with it, because you wrote a blog post in which you endorsed the article. So I'm just asking you, I'm not asking you now about his view, I'm asking you, in your capacity, do you agree? Do you think that the election of Donald Trump is an example of racist progress in this country?
Again, thank you, Senator. I do not recall this article that you are referring to, unfortunately, but I would not make those type of statements, no.
Do you think the United States is a systemically racist nation? Is that fair to say?
Thank you, Senator Hawley. I appreciate these line of questions. I'm a big believer that, and I'm sure this is a value we all hold, that we seek to ensure that everyone has equal opportunity in this country. I think, I understand and appreciate also that the historical challenges that many individuals have experienced based on their race or ethnicity. And I think it's important that we have that understanding in addressing problems and inequities. And so having very tailored approaches, that's the work we did in the philanthropic space, was to understand the experience of indigenous peoples, especially in the Northwest. What are the type of solutions that our funders may want to think about as far as supporting those communities and so on?
I'm asking these questions because you're seeking to be confirmed to lead to what's effectively the federal government's HR department. Mm-hmm. It's a very important position, a very important agency. It impacts millions of federal employees, civil servants across the country. And I want to make sure that in this job that we are, and in this position, that we are committed to unifying Americans, not dividing them, certainly not dividing them along the lines of race. Mm-hmm. Some of the things that we saw this past year attributed to critical race theory and promoted by the federal government, including statements like the nuclear family is an inherently white concept, Christianity is an inherently white religion, other statements about work ethic being a white concept. These, to me, frankly, seem insane and also racist. I mean, if they came out of the mouth of a white person, you would say, that is unbelievably racist. That kind of, and these were in trainings. Those that I'm just referencing were developed by the Smithsonian, but these were in training materials for federal employees, for public officials. I think it's vital that we commit to not trying to divide Americans along lines of race. And so my question to you, my final question to you is that will you commit to uphold and protect our merit-based employment system and the core values that underpin that, and not any effort to introduce considerations of political ideology, racial ideology, or anything other than the merit-based employment system and the laws that define what those considerations and qualifications should be?
Thank you, Senator. I do understand the role of this position. I very much take that very seriously, and upholding merit system principles. I also understand the value of no one should be discriminated based on their race. I was a former civil rights lawyer, and I take that very seriously. I think we all uphold what Martin Luther King Jr. said, which is we should be judged by the content of our character and not the color of our skin, and that's the approach that I've taken.
Very good. I see I'm out of time, Mr. Chairman. I think we also have a vote call. I'll just say, I'll put this for the record. I want to make sure for the Board of Governors, as a state with many, many rural communities, I want to make sure, and I'll give this to you, we don't have time to have you answer, but I'll give it to you for the record. I want to make sure that we protect rural delivery and rural post office. That is so important to my state. Millions of Missourians rely on that and others across the country. But I just want to get from you your commitment, again, we'll do it for the record, that you will work to protect access and delivery services for rural Americans. So I'll give that to you in writing. Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Hawley. Senator Ossoff, you are recognized for your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate you convening this hearing. Congratulations to our panelists for your nominations to these high posts, and thank you for putting yourselves and your families through the process. There are a couple of Georgia connections today that I want to acknowledge. Ms. Ahuja, of course, you are a Georgia native and an alumna of Spelman and of UGA Law School. Thank you for making Georgia proud. And Mr. Stroman, I understand your son is a Morehouse man. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Excellent. Well, pleased to be speaking with you. I want to touch briefly on an issue that is of great concern to many Georgians, and that is the decline in the timely mail service, particularly over the last year. Many Georgians who rely upon USPS to receive prescription drugs, to receive correspondence and gifts from family and friends, many small businesses who rely upon USPS for vital business purposes have contacted me to express their concern about the slow pace of mail delivery over the last year. And so to the three nominated potential governors at the USPS, I'd just like a quick commitment from you that you will meet with my office and, if necessary, come down to Georgia to investigate what may be slowing down the mail and to ensure that we restore timely mail delivery for the people of Georgia. And we could just start with you, please, Mr. Hajar.
Absolutely, Senator, I commit to that. Service is the most important function of the Postal Service, of course, prompt, reliable, and efficient service. We have to get to the bottom of why there were problems, and we have to be sure to correct them. And if it's necessary to investigate Georgia in particular, I commit to doing that.
Thank you. Ms. McReynolds.
Yes, Senator, you have my commitment on that. And I would also just say that feedback from your constituents, as Senator Hassan mentioned earlier, is also going to be critical for the work that we need to do to improve service. So any and all feedback that you're receiving, certainly we will be interested in getting that.
Thank you. And Mr. Stroman.
Thank you, Senator. Yes, service is going to be certainly one of my highest priorities, and you have my commitment to focusing on that issue and working with you on that issue.
Thank you, Mr. Stroman. And Ms. Ahuja, I want to raise with you a concern regarding cybersecurity at OPM. Infamously, a huge trove of sensitive records, personal identifying information for U.S. civil and public servants in national security positions was stolen from OPM in recent years. Efforts have been made to improve cybersecurity, but we continue to see across the federal government and throughout the private sector a high level of vulnerability to cyber attacks. Ms. Ahuja, will you commit to working with this committee and my office and to responding promptly to requests for information? And will you agree to meet with me and this committee at our request to discuss the efforts that OPM is making to improve cybersecurity and protect all of the sensitive data about U.S. citizens and U.S. federal employees that OPM stewards?
Thank you, Senator Ossoff, for that question, and I will absolutely commit to you on all those items. As you know, I was there at OPM right after the data breaches. I've had that experience, understand how incredibly important these issues are, and the lessons that were learned and what we would take forward if I'm confirmed as OPM director.
I'm glad to hear that, Ms. Ahuja. Thank you. And as you well know, much of the data that you will steward in this position, should you be confirmed, is highly sensitive, even if it is unclassified, and we need to be making a stronger effort across the federal government to protect sensitive information and defend our networks and our data. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you, Senator Ossoff. Senator Carper, you are recognized for your questions.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Welcome to all of our witnesses, especially want to welcome Ron Stroman, whom we've known and worked with for many years. Ron, very good to see you. Today is a special day, as some of you know. Today's Earth Day. Perhaps the greatest challenge that we face on our planet today is climate change, climate crisis, extreme weather incidents all over the world. The greatest source of emissions with respect to greenhouse gases is from our mobile sources. And a decade or so ago, this will sound familiar to Gary Peters, our chairman, about a decade or so ago, I was at the Detroit Auto Show. And I think with Senator Stabenow, maybe it was with then Congressman Peters, I'm not sure. But the car of the year, vehicle of the year that year was the Chevrolet Volt. It got about 38 miles per charge. Hybrid vehicle, 38 miles per charge. I was out shopping for a new car a couple of weeks ago, and I drove I think it was a Tesla that got about 350 miles on a charge. And they showed me another one got about 400 miles on a charge. We have GM, we have Ford doing remarkable things as well with respect to the ability to get electric vehicles out there that just perform amazing things. Almost every month we have those kinds of announcements. I think Ford and GM announced earlier this year they're not going to build any gasoline or diesel-powered vehicles in this country, or maybe in the world, after 2035. I think we have a similar announcement coming from Ford. I understand that the Postal Service is engaged with a company, Oshkosh, up in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, to purchase up to 165,000 new vehicles with a vehicle rollout between 2023 and 2033. I understand that the Postal Service plans an initial order of 75,000 vehicles, 10% of which will be electric. So that would be 7,500 vehicles. They need to order about 165,000 vehicles in the next decade or so. And we're looking at an initial order of vehicles up to 75,000, of which 10% will be electric. And I understand there's a provision in the contract that they may have a provision that would allow the Postal Service to say, no, we'd like to have some of those vehicles to be electric, not all diesel or gasoline. I just want to say to the folks who have been nominated to serve on the Postal Board, the Postal Service has a great opportunity here to take the lead in combating climate change, and that's by moving away from internal combustion engines and the emissions they produced, and by investing in a fleet that's more of an electric fleet. I'd like to submit for a record for our Postal Board of Governors nominees regarding what actions the Postal Service can take to ensure that they're taking appropriate action to address the threat of climate change to our planet. If we end up 10 years from now and 165,000 postal vehicles have been ordered and are being built and put out on the road, and we end up with just, I'll say 10, 20, 30,000 of them are electric or maybe powered by hydrogen and fuel cells, if that's all we do, we have really missed a great opportunity. And especially on Earth Day, I want us to take the message to heart. That I just will say to each of the nominees for the Postal Board of Governors, will you respond for the record and share with us your thoughts on this matter, please? Just yes or no, just go down the list.
Yes.
Mr. Stroman, Ron?
Yes, Senator.
Yes, Senator.
And I'll say yes again.
Thank you. I have another question for the nominees for the Postal Board of Governors. The Postal Service has the obligation, some say the burden of going to every mailbox in the country roughly 6 times a week. And whether they have a lot of mail to drop in a mailbox or just a little bit of mail to drop in our mailboxes. Einstein used to say, in adversity lies opportunity. And we've got to be smart enough. The Postal Service can cut costs and innovate and so forth, but we've got to come up with ways to take that burden and make it an opportunity. How do we monetize that obligation So it's really an obligation that goes back to the Constitution. I want each of you just give me one idea. How do we monetize that obligation to turn it into revenue, real revenue for the Postal Service going forward? And Ron, why don't you go first, and then Anton, and then Amber, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And don't be brief. Be right to the point, please.
Okay, I'll get right to the point. One recommendation would be that that platforms, technology platforms, are really changing the way businesses work and interact. The Postal Service could establish a platform working with the Small Business Administration to really improve shipping and delivery charges all across the country. But this is particularly important coming out of the pandemic. And I think if the Postal Service can strengthen its IT infrastructure, it provides just a tremendous opportunity to be able to improve its relationship with small businesses and to help grow the business.
All right, thanks very much. Anton?
Yes, two things, Senator. One is the plan to pursue the growing market in packages. That is hopeful. It's complicated. We may require a whole different network to perform it, but that's one thing. In providing services in post offices where there is a need is also a helpful way to capitalize on the network that exists in the Postal Service today.
Good, thank you. Ms. McReynolds, please, same question.
Well, thank you for the question, Senator, and I agree with my colleagues both in the enhancements for small business services and also package delivery options, and then I'll add one more. Being a local official and working in election administration, I think there are tremendous opportunities that are being missed that we can look at from a partnership level with state and local government. A good example, just one offhand, the National Change of Address database is vital and a very useful set of data for state and local government, not only for elections but other purposes, and that's largely being underutilized right now in states. So I think there is an opportunity to consider some of these other opportunities that maybe haven't been looked at previously for possible expansions of revenue and at least to improve service.
Thank you. One last question for the record, if I could, Mr. Chairman. A 2010 report of the Postal Regulatory Commission recommended adopting a private sector pension cost allocation methods for the postal account within the Civil Service Retirement and Disability Fund to more accurately, more fairly allocate the retirement benefit costs for the postal retirees between the federal government and the Postal Service. And if confirmed, I'm going to ask, I think, one of our witnesses Karen, I'm going to ask you to answer just for the record, to commit to reviewing the recommendations of this report and to taking action as appropriate. You don't have to respond now, but we'll do this for the record. All right, Mr. Chairman, important hearing, very important hearing. We're grateful to the folks that are willing to serve in these capacities, heading up OPM and also serving on the Postal Board of Governors. Thank you so much.
Right. Thank you, Senator Carper. Senator Rosen, you're recognized for your questions.
Thank you, Chairman Peters, Ranking Member Portman. Thank you to each of our witnesses and their families for your time today and for stepping up and being willing to serve our country at such a crucial time. I want to speak quickly about rural delivery, postal rural delivery, because in Nevada, during this pandemic, the Postal Service has been of particular importance to our rural communities, even more so to our rural seniors. In many cases, the men and the women who deliver the mail are the only people that they may see in a day, maybe in a week. I've heard countless stories of from letter carriers that they check on the welfare of seniors who live on their routes, and they serve a role far beyond delivering the mail. So, Mr. Hajar, when we spoke last week, you told me about the time you spent in Pahrump working on postal issues, so I know you're familiar with the importance of the Postal Service to Nevadans. And I want to be sure that we ensure rural communities have access to robust, reliable services from the USPS. So For rural communities like Beatty, Nevada, has a population of just around 800. Caliente, a population just around 900. The Postal Service, again, plays a critical role. So, Mr. Hajar, when we're making operational changes, what rural-specific factors should the Postal Service take into account?
Well, thank you for that question, Senator. We know from the last round of consolidations that service plummeted, and we're still suffering with the deterioration of service that came from that. So that has to be taken into account. When plants are consolidated and offices are consolidated, the communities have to be consulted specifically, and those views have to be taken into account. It's written in the law. It's also written in the law that the Postal Service must supply a maximum degree of effective services to all communities and specifically to rural communities. So that's the law, that's what's required, and that's what I'm going to be dedicated to doing if I'm fortunate enough to be confirmed.
Well, thank you. That leads into my next question about the universal service obligation. Although it's not clearly defined in statute, I'd like to hear from you, Ms. McReynolds, and then Mr. Stroman, how you feel about what you believe the universal service obligation means.
Well, thank you, Senator Rosen. And for me, while it is not clearly defined, I mean, for me, universal service obligation means that every American should expect reliable, affordable, and equitable service across the country. And I, as we talked about when we last spoke, I did grow up in a rural community, and in my work with election administration, I understand very clearly the needs of rural communities. And I think what's even more important is to engage rural communities and stakeholders within those communities about the needs that they have specifically with regards to the Postal Service and their businesses and everything else that they rely on the Postal Service for.
Mr. Stroman, do you want to tell me how you feel about the universal service obligation?
Well, thank you, Senator Rosen. I think it is one of the foundational principles for the Postal Service to all Americans should be able to send and receive mail and access postal services at a reasonable rate, 6 days a week. And I think it's one of the strengths of the Postal Service. If you go back and look at the Postal Reorganization Act, one of the founding principles is rural America. And I have gone to rural parts of the country, and I have talked to rural business owners, and I have talked to customers, and I know how dependent they are on the Postal Service. So it is absolutely critical that the Postal Service provide its reasonable access, delivery services to all parts of the country, but particularly to rural parts of our nation.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I think it's a foundational principle as well. But I'd like to move quickly to the implementation of the STOP Act. Ranking Member Portman introduced that. I was proud to co-sponsor it because we know that much of our supply of potent synthetic opioids, it enters the U.S. illegally. According to the DEA, through our mail system. Las Vegas Valley, unfortunately, is a big market and an important hub. Again, I'm sorry to say, for illegal narcotics. The DEA and CDC's one of their threat assessments of 2018 had Nevada as having one of the highest death rates for overdose from semi-synthetic prescription pain medication. So again, Ranking Member Portman, STOP Act. How do you think that is going to help us stop the flow of these illegal drugs coming through the mail? I guess I have a little time left. I'll start back with you, Mr. Stroman, then if we have time, Ms. McReynolds, please.
Well, thank you, Senator, for the question. I think it's going to be, and it has been enormously helpful. The Postal Service takes the advanced electronic data and works with Customs and Border Protection. It is Customs and Border Protection's responsibility to determine whether or not they believe there may be illicit drugs coming into our shores from overseas. So having that information that the Postal Service can access is absolutely critical. And as I said to Senator Portman, I think the Postal Service has a responsibility to enforce that provision, work with Customs and Border Protection to implement it. So I think it will be and has been an important tool to help in identifying and preventing illicit drugs from coming into the country.
I think I'm going to have to take Ms. McReynolds and Mr. Hajar's comments off the record. We'll submit them. I believe my time's expired, Mr. Chairman, so we'll just ask for them to submit that in writing to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Rosen, for your questions. Well, I want to take this opportunity to thank all of you for being here today, and congratulations again to each and every one of you for your nominations for these very important positions. Certainly appreciated the opportunity to ask you questions, and we will begin our adjournment process right now. In order to close this hearing, I'm going to make the following statement: that all of the nominees have made financial disclosures and provided responses to biographical and pre-hearing questions submitted by this committee. Without objection, this information will be made part of the hearing record with the exception of the financial data, which is on file and available for public inspection at the committee office. The hearing record will remain open until 12 p.m. tomorrow, April 23rd, for the submission of statements and questions for the record. And with that, this hearing is now adjourned.